Welcome to the FCAN webinar, Improving Postsecondary Education Success for Former Foster Youth. I am your host, Kathy McDonald, Assistant Director for Network Partnerships with the Florida College Access Network. I'm thrilled to welcome on the call today guest presenter Brett McNaught, CEO of Educate Tomorrow. Educate Tomorrow has received numerous awards under his leadership for partnership, leadership, and innovation from the Florida International University, Miami-Dade College, Voices for Children, Switchboard Miami, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, American Red Cross Women's Spectrum Awards, and College Board. Brett is an alumni of the National Urban Fellows Executive Leadership Program and the Miami Foundation Miami Leaders Program, where he attended the FIU High Potential Leader Program. Before Educate Tomorrow, Brett was an officer of Build On, where he led the international programs from 2005 to 2012, overseeing the construction of over 1,000 classrooms for more than 40,000 children in rural Haiti, Nicaragua, Senegal, Mali, Malawi, Niger, Nepal, and India. Previously, Brett has served as a United States Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, West Africa. Brett has an MS in Education in Community and Social Change from the University of Miami. He is currently a board member of Hope for Haiti and is also a co-chair of the Education and Employment Committee for Helping Our Miami Youth. I'm also thrilled to welcome on our call today guest presenter Dr. Paul Peralt, Vice President of Research and Evaluation for Helios Education Foundation. Dr. Peralt is responsible for the research and evaluation agenda around Helios's three impact areas: early grade success, college and career readiness, and post-secondary completion. Prior to joining Helios, Dr. Peralt was a research faculty member at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Michigan, where he served as a lead investigator on Arizona's Move On When Ready evaluation and as principal investigator on UMA's Ready Now UMA evaluation. Dr. Peralt received his PhD in Educational Foundations and Policy with a specialization in research methodology at the University of Michigan, along with 2 master's degrees, 1 in Educational Administration and 1 in Secondary Certification. He also earned a JD at the University of Detroit Mercy and a BA in Journalism at Michigan State University. Dr. Peralt currently serves as a board member for Touchstone Health Services and is co-chair of the Data Impact Group for Grant Makers for Education. Most recently, he was selected as a fellow to Arizona's prestigious Flynn Brown Civic Leadership Academy. Before we get started with today's presentation, a few housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. This is all about us learning together, so please submit your questions in the question box, which you should see on the right side of your screen if you're viewing from a desktop computer. We will allot time at the end of today's call for our guest presenters to answer any questions, but you can submit them at any time, and I encourage you to do so. Second, please share what you're learning on your favorite social media platform. On Twitter, you can find us at FL College Access, and you can find our presenters at Educate Tomorrow and at Helios Ed EDFND. Please use the hashtags FCAN so that we can find you. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. All materials will be available within a week of the recording. For those of you who are logged on today, you will find both a copy of this slide deck and the research brief that we'll be referencing in your dashboard of your GoToWebinar screen. Okay, so on to FCAN. For those of you who are new to us and our work, I know we have some new listeners today. For the Florida College Access Network, our mission is to create and strengthen a statewide network that catalyzes and supports communities to improve college and career readiness, access, and completion for all students. Our vision is to see at least 60% of working age Floridians hold a high quality post-secondary degree or credential by the year 2025. We do our work in three primary ways. First, through a network of networks, our local college access networks, which are cross-sector strategic alliances that collaborate to provide more support for student success. Second, through our research, data, and policy work, where we act as a clearinghouse on data in the college and career readiness space. And third, through our statewide initiatives that provide free resources to schools and community organizations to help students plan for and step into their future. To get us started today, we'd like to hear from you all. So let me launch our first poll. We would love to hear your input on what you see as the biggest challenge in providing more support for former foster youth. Is it getting senior leader buy-in, finding funds for the supports that you want to offer your students, helping students learn about the supports that are available, getting students to actually take advantage of those supports, or finally accessing the data that can help define the size of the need at your institution? I see people are starting to vote. Please go ahead and do so. We'll give that another 30 seconds or so. This will help our speakers know where to focus some of their remarks. Let's give that about 10 more seconds. Okay, great. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and close that out. Let me share the results there. So as you'll see, the biggest challenge is getting students to actually take advantage of the supports that are available, which is a really interesting finding. And as you'll hear on the call today from our presenters, they're going to be sharing some best practices from various institutions throughout the state of Florida in terms of what's working, and hopefully you'll walk away today with some great ideas. So let me go ahead and hide that poll. And with that, let me welcome to the webinar Brett and Paul, who will share their important work through the collaboration they did in preparing this brief. Brett and Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm Brett McNaught, CEO of Educate Tomorrow, and we'll be talking about creating equitable outcomes for foster youth, looking at particularly Florida's policy programs and practices around supporting former foster youth in their quest for higher education. We'll be looking at some of the legislative pieces, the key legislation that provides opportunities for former foster youth, and also looking at some of the data that is available to us today, and then finally recommending some best practices, looking at some programs and best practices, and then having some key takeaways from our perspective as to what's next or what could be next. We partnered, Educate Tomorrow partnered with the Helios Education Foundation last year. They were interested in understanding what it was that we did know about access and success for former foster youth in college and universities in Florida. And so we were able to take a few months to do a deep dive into what we did know, what programs existed, what data was out there, and together with Paul's leadership at Helios, we were able to publish this research brief that we'll be looking at as kind of like the first kind of most, I think, comprehensive document to date around this issue. And our hope is over the next 3 years, we will continue to update this and update the community as we receive new information. Educate Tomorrow started in 2003 when we learned that this college tuition exemption is available for former foster youth, and that very few were taking advantage of it. So this has really been core to our mission from the onset of Educate Tomorrow forming. So the research brief, if you want to find that, you can find the report at helios.org under publications. It's the most recent publication. It'll come up right away. And what we'll cover in this presentation, we'll be talking about Helios Education Foundation and how they've become a partner. In just a second, I'll let Paul talk to that. Then we'll look at who we are, and that's what we're doing, and what's central to this work, and who you are. And I've seen who registered for this, and it really is the key stakeholders at the colleges and universities, those in the college system, the university system, and then community partners. That's who's on the call today. And it's really the people that are doing the work, or the leadership that's leading the work at the local level or at the state systems level. So I'm encouraged to see who was interested in being here today. I appreciate your time, and I hope we can leave you with some value here. We'll be looking at the key statistics on former foster youth, both from an access and a success level, and of course the legislation and current promising practices, and then looking at the data trends. But what I would like to kind of kick us off with is, the encouraging, lives that are being changed by these opportunities, and just the sheer numbers of young people who are taking advantage of this growing has been, to me, on a personal level, it's really been heartwarming to see. I know so many of these young people who came from foster care who just walked across the aisle in this last couple of weekends, and it's truly it's changed my life and theirs dramatically. We had, for the first time in our 15 years, we had 38 of our students graduated this semester from college. We had I think 10 from FIU, 20 from Miami-Dade College, and then 8 more from other institutions who are part of Educate Tomorrow. And whole families will be changed for generations, I think, and for the better because of their access and success in college. I was also encouraged to see that we had, just in Miami alone, 120 high school graduates this semester. So we have a bright pipeline of young people who are going to be heading to college in the fall, if not summer. We encourage a lot of our young people to start as soon as they possibly can. So what we'll be doing first, I'll be jumping into the legislation and programs. If we look at the Florida legislation program slide, the first and most important piece of legislation that happened in the state of Florida was that certain populations of students across the state have access to tuition and fee exemptions in the college and university system, the public colleges and universities in the state of Florida. If you look at in the middle of these bullet points are 4 bullet points that affect the foster youth population. You look at the students in the custody of the Department of children and families at the age of 18. So those are young people who were not adopted or reunified with their parents, but they turned 18 in the system. A lot of times they say they aged out of the foster care system. These kids have the most comprehensive list of opportunities for higher education. Then you have those that were in guardianship after 16 or custody of relatives or non-relatives at age 18. And then finally adopted from the foster care system after 1997. Another group that also has the opportunity to get their tuition exempted are students who lack fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence, i.e. those who have unstable housing, which has become more and more of an issue with the rising costs of living and tuition access to higher education. So that's another group that we didn't look into in this brief, but who a lot of times we serve side by side with the foster youth on campus. And finally, the tuition fee exemption is good for those who came out of the Department of Children and Families until 28 years old. So it's the broadest of all the states who offer any kind of tuition exemption, as far as being able to use it for upwards of 10 years after you would potentially graduate from high school. It's worth noting that this legislation does not really have any budgetary it doesn't affect the state budget. It really is the colleges and universities offering these seats to these students who qualify tuition free. But it's not coming from the state of Florida. The next important piece of legislation is it happened with the extended foster care legislation that it coincided with the extended foster care legislation from a few years ago, where youth can now opt to stay in with foster families for additional years if they choose to. And then also, if they are high school graduates or have their equivalency and they enroll in post-secondary or vocational schools, they, on top of the tuition exemption, qualify for a stipend for living expenses of $1,256 a month. As long as they stay in school, they continue to get this $1,256, and that goes up until the age of 23 years old. The requirements are they have to be enrolled in at least 9 credit hours or vocational equivalent and maintain that throughout the semester. So that's a huge opportunity for these young people. These are really for the ones that aged out of custody of DCF at 18 years old. But we are really here to try and help them take advantage of this opportunity and find something that they can live with financially with this stipend and any other work experience that they're able to get. And then the last piece of legislation that kind of rounded this out was in 2014, the legislature included that having college coaching positions integrated within the institutions to provide structure for these students would be considered a best practice and something that the state legislature highly encourages to happen. With that, most colleges and universities have assigned a single point of contact for foster youth when they enroll and attend the various colleges and universities. 6 programs around the state have actually hired dedicated college coaching positions to date, and we'll be going into that. But with these key articles, of legislation, these key statutes, it really does set up former foster youth with potentially the wraparound supports that they would need to access and succeed in higher education at rates of the general student body. And that's really what we're going for, is to help them succeed just as well as any of the other children in our state. Just to give you an idea of the numbers, I'll introduce Paul Peralt to talk about the number of youth, and Paul, maybe at this point you can also explain Helios's role in all of this work.
Right. Thanks, Brett. And for all of you that don't know the Helios Education Foundation, we're located in both Florida and Arizona, and we really strive to improve the post-secondary opportunity for all Floridians, but really look to increase those opportunities for first-generation students, low-income students, and minority students. Naturally, the work with Educate Tomorrow really covers all of those groups. Many of the students we have either fall in one of those categories or all 3 of them, so working around this project really became natural as our board and our community engagement leaders really started asking questions about, the number of foster youth out there, how many were going to college or any kind of post-secondary opportunities, how many were completing, what types of supports were in place. Those were all questions that really started driving our organization to partner with Educate Tomorrow and Positive Pathways to really kind of see where we could help influence that work and be a partner with Educate Tomorrow. One of the early things that we really found out is there was lots of data holes, and we'll talk about that throughout this presentation, is answering those questions. The data wasn't always readily available. We also had to, think about what's the difference between foster youth and student and youth that were adopted, and how those numbers are classified, and how those numbers impact college going as well, and how students are classified. But because of all of those things, we really wanted to make sure that, and Educate Tomorrow really taking the lead on, is that we had a really good idea of the data out there. And so throughout the presentation, we'll show you a number of slides that can kind of be informative about the number of foster youth out there and where they're going around the colleges and universities as well. This slide that you see in front of you today is really the number of youth turning 18 and out of home care from 2012-13 all the way through 2016 and 17. And we should have more recent data coming up pretty soon, I believe. And what the trend really shows is that there's about 1,000 per year that are turning 18 in that out-of-home care, that, we have to think about what's their next step going to be as Floridians. Are they going to go to college? Are they going to just go into the job force? Are they going to do some kind of post-secondary training? And with so much of the focus around state attainment goals being on at least some post-secondary access for nearly 65% for all of the jobs by 2025, there's really this idea of how do we make sure that these youth that might have had not a lot of opportunities as former foster youth get those opportunities in post-secondary education. So this is just kind of like the early heads up as we walk through this presentation about thinking about in the communities that are about 1,000 kids every year are graduating, and what are they prepared to do going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn that back over to Brett.
Thank you, Paul. I wanted to highlight the 4 universities who have dedicated programs for students from foster care. They all started, I think, within the last 10 years. FIU down here in Miami has the Fostering Panther Pride program. They have two dedicated positions to work with foster and homeless students on their campus, and the number of students that have had access to FIU has dramatically increased since this program came on their campus. Currently, I believe it's funded by both private donations and some state funds, and it really has helped tremendously the number of young people graduating from foster care in Miami. The FAU program is called Educate Tomorrow at Florida Atlantic University. They have one dedicated campus coach, Jasmine, who was recently named the Outstanding Academic or Outstanding Advisor of the Year by the largest academic advising association in the country, and that is due directly to the very thoughtful and innovative program that they've designed there under the leadership of Joe Murray. And Jasmine has really, I think, in a lot of ways, set the bar for best practices for college coaches who sit in a formal advising role, academic advising role on her campus. And she is assigned to advise all of the youth on the DCF exemption up until they declare their major and move to their school of choice. Florida State University's Unconquered Scholars Program, led by Lisa Jackson, is, I think, the program that's been around the longest in the state and has seen probably the greatest success to date. It's a very well-respected program with great outcomes, and we're proud to have Lisa as a partner in our network. The University of Central Florida Night Alliance Network is led by Tammy Nadeau. She was able to host an annual conference for us last year at University of Central Florida, where a lot of us around the state were able to come together and share some best practices and talk about next steps and learn directly from the youth who are involved in these programs. So these are the four. We're hoping to get a lot more dedicated university programs on board in the coming years, and we do that through a statewide network that's funded by the Department of Children and Families, a contract that Educate Tomorrow has called Positive Pathways. And Positive Pathways, like FCAN, we're a backbone support for a statewide network of stakeholders, and we're focusing on foster youth accessing and succeeding in higher education. So we get together on monthly calls, quarterly webinars, and then local, regional, and statewide meetings around this work, really in order to share what we're doing in different communities and see if some of those things can be replicated or looked at to inspire local action on campuses that don't currently have programs. And then at the college level, there are two current dedicated college programs. Tallahassee Community College has a Fostering Academic Achievement Fellows program, that has been around for a number of years, and really has been, I think, I think between that and Florida State University, Tallahassee kind of started this trend and led the way, and then in Miami, we were Miami and Orlando, the second and third communities to jump in and try and do dedicated support programs. Educate Tomorrow at Miami-Dade College has 2 full-time dedicated coaches, as well as a number of staff from the community. We're working at Educate Tomorrow and other organizations that work both on and off campus to support students. This is more in the student services realm versus academic advising. So the college coaches, really look at on-campus and off-campus resources to get students, if it's about academic supports, financial aid, scholarships, job opportunities, life skills, mentorship, and also housing, resources in the community, how to apply for and get financial aid, looking at the tuition exemptions and things like that. Currently, the Educate Tomorrow program at Miami-Dade College is funded through Educate Tomorrow, but from funding from the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County, which is a dedicated source of funds from a property tax millage that started 10 years ago, or not 10 years ago, over 15 years ago, and has led to some great success.
Brett, I'm going to interject for a second. Thank you thank you to Mia for correcting. The Tallahassee program apparently is Fostering Achievement Fellowship. So thank you for letting us know. In case people are looking up these programs and want to check into them, it's helpful for us to know the name of the program so people can find what they're looking for. So back to you.
And I would also note that there are several colleges and universities that do provide some really good supports for these students, and they could be under different programs that have a slightly different group of students that they're working with that our students would qualify to be a part of, First Generation or other programs that exist. I know on FAMU, Broward Community College, looking at, a lot of colleges and universities have stepped up with their single points of contact and are doing the work, whether or not it's a full-time dedicated position or just a really dedicated individual or two or champions. Sometimes it's by committee effort on these college campuses to do the work. And if you're out there and you're listening and you are doing this work, we want to know about it. We want to understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if you could benefit from being part of the Positive Pathways Network, or if you want to meet some of the dedicated programs and talk to them about what they did. That's what we're here for, is to be a resource for those who are in the field doing the work and wanting to expand those efforts. And then now we're going to switch over. I'm going to hand it over to Paul to look at some of the data a little bit closer. And so give it away to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Brett. And so this is where we really are in the stage and Educate Tomorrow leading around a data focus. So one of the things that Educate Tomorrow and Helios was interested in is now that we're thinking about these students even more so, how do we make sure that we're tracking to see that any of the work that's happening is having an impact? So within the colleges and universities that Brett just talked about, many of those programs are looking at the number of students that are attending, how many are using the DCF tuition waiver, how many are persisting or completing. And so we really are help driving and thinking about how we could do that statewide really to kind of push opportunities for those numbers to grow. And so briefly, we're going to show you, how many students are receiving the tuition and free exemption waiver in Florida's colleges and universities. Look at the racial and ethnic breakdowns of foster youth in Florida's colleges and universities. And finally, what trends do we see in graduation of foster youth in Florida colleges and universities? Because as many of you know, we've seen lots of trends where we get more students or youth to college, and unfortunately, they don't always persist or complete. And so if we're doing a good job of getting those students to college and having them enroll, we want to make sure that we're getting them to those final stages and really giving them opportunities to be successful. Those are going to be like the main data questions that we talk about. We can go to the next slide, Kathy. So one of the great things that we already have seen is there's been consistent increases in enrollment. And so this slide is set up so on the left-hand side, we're looking at the Florida college system, and on the right-hand side, we're looking at the state university system in Florida. And we're looking across both of the number of students using the DCF tuition exemption at Florida public colleges and universities, with obviously the left side colleges, the right side the universities. And the data is different here, and you see that we don't have the same exact years. For example, in the colleges, we're going all the way back to 08, 09. We go back to 2013 for the public universities, and that just shows where data was being collected, where it was not being collected. It also shows us that where we see some differences in the definitions of what foster youth were in these colleges and universities based upon those organizations. So the way that we've really presented it is the way where the data is most consistent, and we can really be sure that the numbers that we're providing are clear and accurate. So the colleges and universities, starting in 08, 09 with that data, we're having about 1,100 students using those exemptions in Florida in 08, 09. It increases by 9, 10 to 1,900. And we get to where, the last time that we have the actual data to 16, 17, where 3,871 students were using them in the public colleges. So you definitely are seeing that there are increases in the number of students using those, still far behind of the total number that could be using, but we see there's a very positive trend in the colleges that former foster youth are taking advantage of the DCF tuition waiver and really having that opportunity to succeed in post-secondary education. It's very similar. We see an upward trend in the universities. We're again starting in 2013 and not 2008 there, but 435 in 2014. We're seeing a gradual increase over each year. Again, so there is some kind of trend happening in Florida where the universities are doing the same types of things as the colleges, having more opportunities for those students, more than nearly tripling the number from 2013 to 1,145 by 2018. So we're seeing these positive trends and consistent increases in enrollment in the colleges and universities, meaning that at least some things are happening out there to make sure that these students are aware of these opportunities and taking advantage of those opportunities for success. And we can move to the increases in graduations. Along with that, we are seeing increases in graduation. Unfortunately, right now, what we see, we don't have a lot of years to look at, but we don't see that steep level of an incline that we saw in enrollment. So we're hoping that over time we'll see that more increases in graduation, but we do see that there's some positive trends there. For example, if we look at the left-hand side again, is going to be the Florida college system. In 2013-14, basically about 90 students were graduating either with the Associate's Art or Associate in Science degree. That number increased to 115 by 2016 and 17. Now, if you can go back to the previous slide, Kathy, you can see that, again, just to look at the enrollment, we're nearly 4,000 students were enrolled in 2016-17, but we're only graduating about 115 when we go back to the graduation slide. So there's lots of work to do to make sure that these students, once they get to college, have those wraparound supports that Brett was talking about in the colleges and universities. Because, if we looked at the year before, there was about 3,500 students in the year before that about 3,300. We really would expect that, we're starting to have higher numbers than just a couple hundred or even 115. So the importance of those students having supports once they start college and enroll in college, you can't be underplayed. And that's why, what Brett talked about, what's happening at the example colleges and university is quite important. We see a similar trend. 2013-14, there was about 45 students that got a bachelor's degree from the university system. In 2 years, that number has gone up to 94, so more than doubling. But we really want to see those numbers increases too. But these are very good indicators of, where we're starting from as we really start looking at this data. We see positive increases in enrollment. Now we'd like to see and follow through over the next few years. Are we seeing those increases in graduation at the college and universities? And secondly, are we seeing more increases in graduation due to the types of programs with the college coaches that could be there as wraparound supports? The next couple slides, if we go to the next one, really are an opportunity to see, how many of these students are enrolling at the universities. So, are the universities doing a good job of making sure that they're actually bringing some of these students, giving them opportunities? And so we present 2 years of data here for the Florida universities, and you could see, make comparisons, that some of these universities have are looking to make bigger jumps. University of Florida, moved from 53 to 71. University of South Florida nearly doubled from 82 to 162. Florida Atlantic University, 91 to 137. Almost everywhere we look here, we see an increase, but we know that there's still more opportunities for more of these students to be in the universities. And total, again, about 1,182 students in the university system. The college system, we also see increases, and there's nearly 3,871 students in the college system. And can we go back one slide, Kathy? We'll start with Broward. Broward has 377 of those students in 2016-17. Florida State College at Jacksonville, 264. Hillsborough Community College, 282. Miami-Dade, around 400. Next slide. And then, some of the other higher achievers here: Palm Beach State, St. Petersburg College, Seminole State College, Tallahassee Community College, Valencia College. So some of these state college systems are having impressive numbers of students that are entering the system and at least enrolling. And you can see from these numbers and why we share them, there's also other opportunities at other colleges within the system to make sure that they get more or to provide more opportunities for these students. But overall, again, we're seeing remarkably large increases over the last 10 years in the number of foster youth that are actually going to these college systems, going to the college system and enrolling. And now we really want to see, can they succeed, especially with the types of additional supports and coaches that Brett has been talking about throughout the presentation. With that, we want to leave you a set of recommendations, and Brett and I are going to, go through these in a little bit different order and talk about them. But we want to set up these recommendations to really kind of reflect on what we saw with the data and to reflect on what Brett and his team and others that are working with these students and providing the coaches are really seeing. So with that, Brett, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know you're going to talk about that first recommendation.
Sure, Paul. Thank you. And these recommendations were made at the conclusion of of the research brief that we produced, and really it was looking at us as two organizations, Educate Tomorrow and Helios Education Foundation, as to what we thought we could do together to help move this effort forward. And one of the things that we saw as a key was making sure that state policy leaders and institutions understood, the importance of having a dedicated coach on the appropriate college campuses and university campuses. And what we mean by that is, looking at the numbers, looking at access, those programs that have 100 or 200 or even upwards of 300 to 400 students on campus. Looking at those colleges and universities as worthy of at least a deeper discussion on how we're supporting these students and whether or not offering a more intensive delivery of services is warranted. So getting the word out is important. There's a lot of pressing issues in the state of Florida for all Floridians, and a lot of people don't even know, even at the college level, the institutional levels, and the policy leaders. A lot of times, they don't know that there is the tuition exemption. They don't know that students, from foster care can get a living stipend of $1,256 a month. And then they don't know that there was, 2014 legislation that was passed that suggested having college coaches. So, from our role, Helios and Educate Tomorrow is to really get that word out there early and often through, our collaborative partners like FCAN and this webinar to hopefully spread the word and galvanize some momentum towards this. And Paul, the second point?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. The other thing that we really came to when we really started doing this work is we found that there wasn't always a consistency around the processes and uses of the tuition and fees. So, when we started talking to some college administrators or coaches, there was different times when the students had to apply for the waiver. Sometimes they had to do it each semester. And that really, and sometimes people didn't know, did it actually include, could you use that for books and other kinds of administrative fees? And so when we started having those discussions, it really became clear that that inconsistency was having different impacts at different institutions for students. So one of the things we really wanted to identify is a way that state policy leaders and the institutions of higher ed that are serving these students collaborate to improve the consistency around the processes and the uses of the tuition and fees exemption and other policies, so that students, especially if they were transferring from one college to another college or a college to a university, that the processes and the policies in place would be consistent, that students weren't, sometimes losing out because they took too long to get some paperwork filled out or signed, but really have an opportunity for there be a way for the institutions to follow a consistent manner so that the policies and practices were implemented in a way that was really beneficial to the foster youth, and making sure that they weren't going to run into any problems as they were enrolling, but also matriculating through out of high school into college. Then the third recommendation, if we could go to the next slide, we really wanted to talk about, through our work, institutions of higher education should create data systems that improve communication and support structures for college coaches. So in some institutions, the college coaches are waiting basically for the institutions to let them know what foster students are entitled to services. And some institutions, the foster students had to reach out to those coaches. And that kind of variation just kind of, again, creates holes and problems to really get those students the support. So we're really asking that institutions of higher ed think about ways that when these students enter the system, that the coaches and support services are made aware of these students right away, so that the suite of services, whether it's offered through one of the more intensive programs that Brett talked about earlier, or through other programs that other colleges and universities have right now, but that they can actually start right away. And so students aren't waiting for those services or looking for them. I mean, I think we see in a lot of education research out there that a lot of times students, if they're unaware of something or they don't know something exists, they don't search out because, they're nervous. They're not, typically ready to reach out and look for those things or might be aware of them. So really, we're putting the onus task on the institutions to make sure that those support personnel can really identify those students early on to get them services right from the beginning. And that would be our third recommendation.
And then lastly, identifying the need of a backbone supporting organization to lead a statewide network is something that the Florida Reach was formed back in 2013, and the backbone of that was for the first few years was the Department of Children and Families, and then later that backbone support shifted to Educate Tomorrow with the contract from the Department of Children and Families. We hope that the funding of the backbone organization continues with this work, whether it is always going to be Educate Tomorrow or not. We think that this is an important part of the success of these programs is to have a venue for sharing and for collaboration and growth and learning. So we're encouraged that we were able to establish another contract year of funding from the Department of Children and Families that will start in July of this year and go through June of next year, and that Helios also came in with 3 years of funding to help support our efforts in leading this network from a backbone support situation. So we're encouraged by that, and there we'll leave you with any questions.
Thank you, Brett and Paul. I had a great question from Doris, who asks, do you have data of the number of foster care students attending our technical colleges? I know, Paul, you mentioned that data was a little hard to come by and a little tricky in this world, but it's a great question because not all of our students are going to a 2 or 4 year institution.
That is a great question. We have our 2019 conference at the end of the month, the 30th and 31st, and we're spending a full the first half of the first day, the 30th, bringing in the leadership, the statewide leadership of the technical colleges and vocational centers to talk about just that. How can we really formalize a strong working relationship with those? I think the answer to the question about do we have the data is I haven't seen it, so I don't think so. If it is out there, that's exactly kind of our next intention is to form those relationships so we can find out what do we know, what don't we know.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Positive Pathways Conference in a couple of minutes. But any of our technical colleges that are listening in, I do encourage you to join in that conversation and help us fill in those gaps on the data because it's so critical. We're getting a bunch of questions here. Vanessa asked, what guidance is available for colleges and universities that want to start programs for students on the exemptions?
From the Department of Children and Families, the Positive Pathways contract that we have is to provide some of that technical assistance and support and guidance. We have kind of a new member orientation. We have a lot of resources for colleges and universities to tap into if they're interested in starting a program. But at this point, that would be coming from us, from the contract itself. There wouldn't be any formal guidance from the college system or university system that I know of. The Department of Children and Families leadership under the independent living program is quite strong when it comes to providing us with the guidance on what we should be focusing on. So they are an active partner. The Department of Children and Families is an active partner in those conversations.
Great. And I think that's, again, part of what you'll be covering in your conference next week, I believe. Maya asks, for programs seeking funding, what are some funding partners to look for?
So in our experience in South Florida, we found the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County, the Miami Foundation, to some extent the United Way, and some family foundations to be very complementary to finding a way to fund these programs and some of the off-campus supportive programs as well. So I know every county has a United Way, has maybe a community foundation. Some counties might have similar funding streams like the Children's Trust. We would hope that the legislature at some point would get behind funding some of these programs, and I think in some cases, at least at FIU, that has been the case. And then you have some of these larger foundations like Helios, like the Andrus Family Fund, who are in multi-states or national, or who have come in to support this. And we're always interested to help colleges and universities brainstorm these things. That's part of what our intended backbone role is to have those conversations and see where there might be opportunities that we might know of that they have.
That's great. Thanks for offering that. I want to make sure I loop back. Philip shared that when you were talking about the various programs that already existed, he shared that Broward College launched their Seahawk Outreach Services SOS about a year ago to support this population. So that's another one that's dedicated in the state, which is great to hear. Sama shares, how can current foster youth in high school receive a college coach? Do we offer that yet?
In Miami, we piloted. We're in year 2 of a partnership with Florida International University and their program called Education Effect. We're also through the Children's Trust of Miami-Dade County. We Educate Tomorrow through one of our contracts funds 3 full-time college coach positions at 3 high schools on their feeder pattern, elementary and middle schools, to do just that, to work on the access piece, to get the youth who might qualify for these exemptions prepared to take advantage of them. And a lot of times it also means not only like some care coordination and coaching, but also referring youth to different partners in the community, legal advice, housing, access to internships, and academic supports.
That's great. Very briefly, because we only have about time for one more question, what local and state resources can be shared to facilitate the transition out of college and into the workforce for our college graduates?
That's also a very interesting point. When we were first having college graduates succeed in obtaining their degree, we also saw that there were gaps in launching them into their career, because it does take a lot of times it takes a network. It takes experience in building the soft skills and the actual experience within an employment structure, having those interview skills, understanding workplace dynamics. So what we did is we partnered with a lot of community partners to offer a lot of those things. So when we do have young people graduating with a college degree in their hand, it's not just a degree that they have, but they also have some experiences and some skill set to launch into a first job, keep it, and make sure that it's in their field of study.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted. Thank you so much for that. That was helpful. You may have heard us talk about the Positive Pathways Conference that's at the end of this month. It's May 30th and 31st at St. Petersburg College on their Gibbs campus. If you haven't already registered and you would like to go deeper into this topic, I can't say enough great things about the network. This is really how we get better at this work, is sharing ideas and learning from each other in terms of what's working. So please check that out at positivepathwaysflorida.org. If you aren't already registered for our list, if you want to stay in touch on top of our latest webinars, briefs, and promising practices, please go to floridacollegeaccess.org, subscribe. And with that, I really want to thank Brett and Paul for helping us understand the changing legislative landscape. It's great to see that it's continuing to move in the right direction and to help more former foster youth through these promising practices. As you're seeing, there's still a lot of holes in this work. And so for all of you who are on the call that are interested in supporting our students, we really encourage you to join and become part of the Positive Pathways Network so that we can learn from each other and really start to have strong data systems and have promising practices that we can count on to help students succeed. With that, let me thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you, Kathy. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.